The Chinese Communist regime is accelerating its timetable for taking control of Taiwan as Beijing ramps up military maneuvers against the island. Experts say the next 2 or 3 years will be the most dangerous period where an invasion of Taiwan could take place. On Sunday, April 4th, Japan reported that the Chinese aircraft carrier Liaoning and its escorts had entered the Pacific. They had sailed through the Miyako Strait through Japan's southern Ryukyu Island chain northeast of Taiwan. This was confirmed the next day. China's military, the People's Liberation Army, PLA, said in a statement that its carrier group was conducting maneuvers around Taiwan. Meanwhile, according to Taiwan's defense ministry, at least 10 PLA warplanes, including 4 J-16 and 4 J-10 fighter jets, a Y-8 anti-submarine warfare aircraft, and a KJ-500 early warning aircraft, entered Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, ADIZ. Taiwan's ADIZ, located adjacent to the island's territorial airspace, is an area where incoming planes must identify themselves to the island's air traffic controller. Last year, the Chinese Air Force flew about 380 sorties into Taiwan's ADIZ, the highest number in a given year since 1996. In 2021, the presence of large numbers of PLA aircraft in Taiwan's ADIZ is becoming more common. Recently, it occurs almost on a daily basis. According to Taiwan's defense ministry, the largest incursion was on March 26th, when 20 Chinese military aircraft, including 4 nuclear-capable H-6K bombers, 10 J-16 fighter jets, 2 Y-8 anti-submarine warfare aircraft, and a KJ-500 airborne early warning and control aircraft entered Taiwan's ADIZ in one day. This Wednesday, on April 7th, 15 Chinese aircraft, including 12 fighters, entered Taiwan's ADIZ again, with an anti-submarine aircraft flying to the south through the Bashi Channel between Taiwan and the Philippines. The way China flanks Taiwan with military exercises in both the air and sea seems to be revealing how the PLA will approach taking Taiwan. That is, the island will be surrounded and closed in, while aiding efforts from the outside will be cut off. When the war begins, the PLA will mainly use Air Force to control the Bashi Channel to the southwest of Taiwan, blocking U.S. forces coming from its military bases in Singapore and the Indian Ocean. Meanwhile, the Liaoning carrier group will be used to control the island of Okinawa, blocking U.S. forces coming from its base in Japan. In a report on China's state media platform Global Times, executive chief editor of Chinese magazine Shipborne Weapons, Shi Hong, said, "The exercise showed that the PLA is capable of surrounding the island of Taiwan, isolating its troops and leaving them nowhere to run and no chance to win if circumstances arise." The exercises also sent a message to both the US and Japan. Since any US and Japanese military interventions would likely come from the east, China, by exercising its carrier group there, demonstrated it could cut off that help, Shi said. Beijing's frequent incursions and maneuvers are part of a series of necessary dry runs in preparation for an invasion of Taiwan. Since the PLA has never conducted a forced landing on a hostile power in a real-life situation before, and coupled with the complexity of amphibious landing operations, it is safe to assume it will have a large-scale dry run in the next 2 years. The communist regime sees Taiwan as its own territory, and the head of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, has vowed to take the island back in the name of China's unification. The official name of Taiwan is the Republic of China, or ROC, and was commonly known as China before 1949. It was a sovereign state based in mainland China, covering 11.4 million square kilometers of territory, making it the second largest in the world. The republic started in 1912 after overthrowing China's Qing dynasty emperor. During World War II, the ROC made huge sacrifices and suffered great losses in its military forces in fighting against the Japanese invasion. The CCP took advantage of this situation to stay far behind the front line and grow in strength. In 1949, it took control of the country and established a communist state called the People's Republic of China, PRC. Upon being defeated by the CCP, the ROC government retreated to Taiwan. Later, Taiwan gradually transitioned to become a democracy. Today, Taiwan has become a beacon and a model of a democratic society for the Chinese nation. even though the island has been governed as a distinct territory for more than 7 decades, a de facto independent country with its own democratically elected government, military, constitution, and currency, the Chinese regime has refused to recognize Taiwan's sovereignty. In fact, the very existence of Taiwan, or ROC, is a constant reminder that the CCP's ruling of China is illegitimate, not to mention that in contrast to the democratic Taiwan, the CCP's totalitarian ruling represents brutality, cruelty, oppression of the people, and gross violation of human rights in mainland China. Xi Jinping sees himself not only as the successor to the communist dictatorship in China, but also a powerful leader of the global communist movement. After successfully imposing a draconian national security law in Hong Kong and a genocidal campaign against ethnic Muslims in the Xinjiang region, Xi saw it as his mission to proceed further and eliminate democracy and freedom in Taiwan. Xi once said internally before the 19th Communist Party Congress that his predecessors, Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping, both saw their greatest regret as being unable to unify Taiwan. As the third-generation leader of the CCP, Xi was determined to fulfill this old ambition and resolve the Taiwan issue so that the Communist Party can gain legitimacy as the ruling power of China. There are also other factors pushing the CCP to invade Taiwan. For example, China's rapidly aging population. Economic factors such as the shortage of microchips for the regime's development are also pushing Xi to attack Taiwan. China is heavily dependent on foreign semiconductors, tiny chips that power everything from cell phones to missiles. According to Bloomberg, China imported $380 billion worth of chips in 2020, accounting for about 18% of all its imports. Following a series of sanctions slapped on Chinese companies during the Trump administration, the U.S. has crippled the smartphone business of Chinese tech giant Huawei. Chinese chipmaker SMIC has also been put on a trade blacklist. Now, the communist regime is struggling to secure foreign semiconductors. Taiwan's TSMC is the largest contract chipmaker in the world. The CCP can't help but get its hands on the island's semiconductor-making capabilities for the survival of the regime. The CCP is now comprehensively preparing for war on Taiwan, not only in military forces and operations, but also in logistics and transportation. Reportedly, China has been buying large quantities of grain, oil, and minerals from overseas since last year. For example, while the regime officially claims to have produced the highest amount of grain in 2020, its grain import has increased approximately twofold. Well then, when might the CCP invasion of Taiwan happen? It largely depends on what role the U.S. will play in protecting Taiwan. Over the past 2 years, the Trump administration's made a series of moves to demonstrate a stronger commitment to Taiwan, including sending a cabinet member to Taipei last year. This made him the highest-level U.S. official to visit the island since formal diplomatic relations were severed in 1979 in deference to China. In 2020, the U.S. announced $5.1 billion in arms sales to Taiwan. The weapon packages covered truck-based rocket launchers made by Lockheed Martin Corp. Called a High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, HIMARS, AGM-84H Standoff Land Attack Missile Expanded Response, SLAM-ER missiles, and related equipment made by Boeing, and 6 MS-110 Recce external sensor pods made by Collins Aerospace for jets. These advanced weapons will greatly boost Taiwan's self-defense capability, but still, it will take about 5 to 6 years to get them fully set up for use. This is probably why U.S. Admiral Philip Davidson, head of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Indo-PACOM, gave an estimate during a congressional hearing in early March that the CCP's invasion of Taiwan could take place in 6 years. However, U.S. Admiral John Aquilino, the nominee to replace Davidson as head of Indo-PACOM, said in the hearing that the threat of a Chinese invasion is much closer to us than most think. This point was echoed by former National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, who in March said that Xi believes he has a fleeting window of opportunity that's closing in relation to attacking Taiwan. McMaster said the period from 2022 onward marks the time of greatest danger for Taiwan, noting that this coincides with the conclusion of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics. The CCP officials' arrogance and undisguised contempt for U.S. officials during the Alaska meeting revealed that Beijing sees the Biden administration as undeserving, incompetent, or even the weakest in American history, and it will take advantage of this perfect timing to make a move. Unlike the Trump administration, which enacted some of the toughest measures to counter the CCP in decades, including support and recognition of Taiwan and Hong Kong, and forming alliances in the Indo-Pacific to deter the CCP's ambitions in the region, Biden has never even used the word threat to describe the CCP. Instead, he has framed the regime as America's most serious competitor. The Biden administration is seeking cooperation in as many ways as possible and avoiding crossing Beijing's red line. In the face of an escalating military threat from China, the Biden administration has had an ambiguous policy of deterrence towards the CCP. When the CCP invasion happens in the future, it's likely that the U.S. would shy away from defending Taiwan for fear of a new world war or by justifying the CCP's move as another cultural norm, the same way Biden sees the genocide in Xinjiang. On the other hand, the CCP feels encouraged by seeing what the new U.S. military is doing after the original strong military leadership was purged and replaced by leftists. PLA soldiers definitely won't be running for their lives when met with a military in maternity uniforms led by the Pentagon's LGBT Officer Corps. China will invade Taiwan with or without the blessing of the USA. If the CCP misses the 2 to 3 year window of opportunity during the Biden administration, it may lose its chance forever.